Hello and welcome to Tell Us Your Effin' Story, a podcast by franchisors for franchisors that goes behind the scenes with some of the most interesting people in the franchising sector. I'm your host, Bruce McFarlane, with my co-host, John Sully. Today we've got Selina Bridge, the CEO of KX Pilates.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you know the effin' story
I've
is
just
not
found
what
out.
you think.
I was a little shocked initially, but then I put the two and two together.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, let's drill down. Let's go right back to the start. Where you from? Parents, family, what did they do? Blah, blah, blah. What got you on the journey?
Oh, gosh, on the journey. But actually not originally, I am still English. So been here for 17 years. Parents, my dad was a director in an engineering firm, so completely different. My mum was pretty much a stay-at-home full-time mum, but then she actually did do a lot of admin in a hospital. Very sort of customer service, friendly orientated person.
Whereabouts was that? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Surrey, which is England. Closer. We all say close to London. It's easy for people to know. So grew up there, was always in Surrey. My dad travelled a lot with work, so his role was a global role and worked on a lot of different projects internationally. So always grew up with this international mindset. And even my mum, so I said she was a stay-at-home mum. Obviously, before she had me, she wasn't a stay-at-home mum, but she was in more of an admin role. She worked for UNESCO, so worked for UNESCO in different countries, the United Nations. So both parents lived in different countries. So I think I've always grown up. I remember seeing lots of photos on the wall of Paris, Johannesburg, just different places, and sort of felt quite inspired that there's more to more to life than just Surrey, which Surrey is a great place.
Yeah. And brothers, sisters?
I've got an identical twin sister. So you talk about your twins.
Really cool. Yeah. That's
so
great.
I think that was that really is a huge part of forming my personality. I didn't realise how competitive I was, and I don't know what yours. I know you've got a boy and a girl, but
they just hate each other.
Yeah, I mean, you've just got your benchmark, your walking benchmark next to you all the time, and being identical. Luckily, we literally were the same ability. Like within, if it was swimming, it would be literally a fraction of a second. School grades within 1%. So I think my parents liked that.
So the school grades still stayed close?
Yeah. We actually ended up then doing the same degree. Like
God.
we literally were always doing the same. We couldn't really differentiate ourselves. We tried, and even now we joke, we try and put on a twin disguise because we just don't like being too twinny, but we just can't help it. We are identical twins.
Right.
But she doesn't run KL, so that's our biggest difference. We went into different careers, but I mean, having an identical twin, obviously competitive. We're both sporty, so I mean, even practicing tennis in the garden, you always had your practice partner. There's always someone all the time. So I think.
And are you close? You're still close?
Very close. So
right.
She does live in Tasmania now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She moved to Australia. I can't remember how long. Probably 10 years ago, or no, actually, we've been here 17. Probably 13 years ago. So yeah, I'm very lucky. She's here, but she's in Tas, so that's a lovely, healthy distance.
Yeah.
And I was there the other week. Had a really great time. We've both got families similar age. But we just noticed as soon as we're together, it's just really awkward. People start comparing, and the conversational focus, really goes into, either what you look like or what you're doing, and it's really distracting. I really like being independent.
Yeah. I mean, it is unique, but I just want to get back to something. So there was a difference of 1%, but were you the higher?
Do you know what? Luckily, it always flipped.
Right.
So, one time, it sort of depended on, it's interesting, the effort that would go in.
Yeah. That's
so
what I
if
was thought.
someone was doing a little bit more effort, they would be getting that higher percent. So I've really noticed that.
But it's interesting if your interests were similar too. So you're doing similar subjects and then similar course.
Yeah.
Because not the same sports you're playing as well.
Yep. Everything was the same.
What was the course you did? What course
We did have the same boyfriend though.
What?
No, I said we didn't have the same boyfriend.
Just to clarify.
That you know about.
Yeah, that's true.
There's just so many questions after that.
Oh dear.
But so what was the course? Sorry?
At university we both did business administration.
Right.
Within that you do, you choose your modules. You do we both did a mixture of financial and marketing and legal and everything else. But on the course we did placements. And that was where, we couldn't both go off to a placement together. I actually worked for, at the beginning, Arthur Andersen, which was, it's now gone under, but it was one of the top 5 accountancy firms. Mm-hmm. She went to work for Barclays Global Investors, but I then did another one, which was for Puma. Started to work at the Commonwealth Games, and then I worked with Octagon, which was a sports marketing agency. Jasmine continued to work for those more financial firms, and that was almost the start of where we had some differences. The career started to take a difference. In our final year, I lived in Copenhagen for 6 months. She lived in America for 6 months. She actually met her husband now there. So again, the differences started to come when we were at university. But then when I started my career, to be honest, started off, I had a contract at PwC, was going to go and do the typical end university, have your job. I was going to become a tax accountant.
Oh, Christ.
Came travelling to Australia and found it very hard to say I was going to do that.
Yeah.
When I was travelling on the bus with everyone and people talking about what you're going to do, I really struggled to say I was going to do that.
So were you backpacking or?
Yeah, just
sort
for
of gap year
3
or?
months. It was at the end.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was a really good revelation. After that, came back, resigned before I started.
Oh, really?
That was probably the big
How'd your
risk.
parents go with that decision?
Oh,
that
yeah,
right?
they supported it. Yeah, they did.
You didn't totally throw it in because you actually still got a job in a business sort of environment, though.
Yeah, no, I did, exactly. But yeah, it's funny. I can't really remember the response, but I think they knew at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision and feel happy and back yourself. And I just did not feel comfortable going for a job that I didn't feel my heart. I didn't want to just do a job for the sake of it. But ended up working for a sports marketing agency, which I absolutely loved. I remember my dad, though, saying, what are you doing? Because comparing, and it's bad to compare people, but my sister had gone into Barclays Global Investors, literally was getting paid about 3 times my salary. I seemed to be working 3 times as much, but it was because I loved what I did.
Yeah.
So that was interesting seeing my dad look at us going like, oh, what was that decision? But I've never hated what I've done. Like, I've always loved to work.
So it wasn't a marketing role, it was account management of...
Yeah, exactly. It was a sponsorship agency.
Yeah.
So we were, at that time, I was managing different accounts. It was UBS, B&Q, they sponsored the Olympics. We had an Olympic team and did different sponsorship programs with athletes, and then you brought to life the sponsorship through branding, awareness, hospitality, all those sort of things.
Really cool.
And then I ended up working with Vodafone and the English cricket team. At the time, we won the Ashes in 2005.
That was a long time ago.
Moving along.
Yeah, it was a good time when I was there.
Yeah, so did you... Yeah, so in that role with Vodafone, you were pretty active with the team and doing all the activations and stuff?
Yeah. And that's the thing, I loved it. And I mean, for me, going back to history, sports... the emotional connection with sports, how you feel if you're a participant, how you feel if you're part of a community or, really back in a team. I've just always loved a sporting community. So then to be able to work in that environment, just absolutely loved it.
So what sports were you mentioned tennis, is that the one? Or what?
Tennis, swimming, they were my 2 key sports, and then played literally everything under the sun growing up.
Were you handy? Were you a good tennis player?
Well, I mean, coming here, there's definitely better tennis players. Played a lot at a competitive level. Probably swimming was probably the better sport, but at the same time, you get to sort of 14, 15 and realise there's more to a weekend than swimming galas.
Yeah, 4 o'clock starts, all that sort of crap.
And weekend swimming galas rather than going out with friends. But anyway,
it's a tough sport as kids. You needed to grow up in Queensland.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah. Swimming in England is not the same as swimming in Queensland.
No, sun's up.
Yes, and so after doing that, you spent a few years at the agency.
Yep.
Moved into some other roles where you were this is around when you came to Australia, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So the BMW role was next?
Yeah, so my husband, boyfriend at the time, we met at university, so we really recognised we met when we were young. We found ourselves sort of living a bit of a married life too early, and he was one who had bought a house. He was commuting to a place called Bracknell, which is a bit like commuting to Mulgrave, and he's probably 23, thinking, life could be more interesting. He actually got offered a role with BMW here in Melbourne.
All right.
So that was the drive really for him to go. I was, however, loving my life. I was loving London. I was loving my job. I really struggled with the idea of moving. But so he actually came out here first. He came here sort of 6 months before me. Sort of threw him in to try it out.
Did he travel with you when you travelled the first time? So you did that alone?
I did it with a friend, yeah. We were actually together.
Yep.
But yeah, so he came here, and I mean, that sort of separation, though, I really thought, okay, at the end of the day, I do want to be with Ollie, who's now my husband. But that was a hard move to go, okay, I'm going to give up this job that I love and try something new. That's probably to say the bravest thing I've done. Is really not that brave. But just trying something new, moving across the world. But I ended up, first of all, keeping with the cricket team, because then we were playing the Ashes here in 2006. I was able to still work a little bit, so that was a nice transition in. And then I met someone from BMW who at the time was then the head of marketing, and there just happened to be a role within BMW going for 3 months at that time in the sponsorship and sort of sporting marketing area, and took that and it turned into a 3.5-year role. So I was a bit lucky.
So you were 23 or 4 when all that was happening, wasn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Okay, look, it's a big call at that age.
Yeah.
It's a big call.
Do you know, we've just had our nephew staying with us from England. He's doing his gap year before going to university. And we really noticed, it was just interesting, his mindset though. So it was a big call then, but now I think COVID really impacts the younger generation, because in a way his outlook on life is, it's just possibly a little less ambitious than what we were, because he's had sort of 3 years really been at home, a bit protected. We really thought, wow, actually, he's not 19 travelling, he's sort of 16 travelling. And that seeing him, so I wonder that the generations now, particularly at this time, sort of leaving home, it's different. So,
That's interesting. Because, I mean, that's one of the big things that we still hear about. I don't know if you've heard any more, but they're the backpackers that we've lost over COVID has impacted so greatly on our workforce. And obviously the students. That's an interesting take on it as to whether that will ever come back for the next 3 or 4 years. They sort of break that mould.
Do you know, it's easy to say I'm sure it will. Then again, have careers change? Like, so many younger people have started businesses or they've got other interests. Like our world of go to school, maybe have a quick break before you go to university. We're on the treadmill of keep progressing. Like, that linear journey that we're on has changed. So whilst we might think, oh, that'd be nice, it'll all go back to normal, it may do. We might find people do that later on, or you've got flexible jobs. It's a mixture of travelling and working, or so I don't know.
And not, I don't want to generation bash, but you know, when you're a lot younger than me, but when you're growing up, that our parents' age group were pretty disciplined. They just got on, and I would imagine, particularly in England, because their parents' generation saw it all really through the war. But the work ethic is instilled from what you see around you. Do you, with your nephew? Do you see that work ethic, the same sort of work ethic that you would have, you have, I'm sure?
Do you know, to say I don't know, probably I can't really judge him while he's travelling because he doesn't have anything to do. I think we all notice a difference in work ethic in different generations. I think I'm trying to then reflect on when I was younger, though, and, you know, at that time when you're mid-20s, especially like for me, coming from England where you think you know it all because we've had all this experience, and now looking back, God, you really did not know it all. You sort of think you've got confidence. I think younger people have confidence. But then it's important when you are older to look back and think, well, no, they're not necessarily entitled or arrogant. They just look at things in a different way. And how do you work out how to work together? Because I know what I was like. I did have the hard work ethic. So I was definitely not coming in and expecting to be given. I worked. I've always worked really hard. But you just work in a different style. So I think it's just really important that all generations try to understand, you know, the other generation. But we are different.
Yeah.
And your early roles, like you said the marketing role and stuff, you loved being involved in that, but you worked really hard. Was there an expectation on you, you know, as the youngest one in the group, and that you had to work really hard and that they put high demands on you, or was it just no?
No, I don't think so. I've always been a hard worker. Sometimes I think I'm just a sucker because I just enjoy working. You know, even yes, it's a beautiful day, I just can't help but think and sort of, does they work or just enjoy being productive or thinking or moving ahead all the time? So that was just me. I don't think anyone said we expect you to give up your life. But again, if I'm enjoying something, I don't really see it as work too much. I enjoy doing that.
And what about, so you were at BMW and then Iris, and what sort of things did you learn at those two places?
Yeah, really good. I mean, BMW was interesting because when I was at the agency in London, I thought, I wonder what it'd be like to be client-side. Oh, clients, it must be so much easier, you know, different. When you're on the agency side, you are servicing that client. But I found that quite interesting because for me as a personality, it probably didn't suit me that well. It was a bit too slow and structured, and the head office is in Germany, and everything was sort of coming out, and it was very regulated. So great brand experience and really good to be part of that company. But I learnt that actually, it probably wasn't my personality type, and I definitely recognised there was people within the organisation who almost were just sitting there as a role. Got the role, probably going to be there for 20 years, and that was it. And I struggled with that. Yeah. And that's when Iris came along. I actually worked with them when I was at university for a little bit, doing a project. I mean, gosh, they sent me and a few others to Italy to do some client research. Went to a couple of universities to do some research.
What a crock of shit.
But anyway,
so what, Iris? Sorry,
Iris is an advertising agency. I mean, now it's sort of a big marketing, communications, advertising strategy. But at the time, they were quite small and young. They were in Sydney and they wanted to set up in Melbourne. And I was approached to basically help set up that Melbourne office. Cool. And by session, it was taking a couple of the big accounts. Shell and Adidas were two key clients and managing them from here. So that was great. That was an example of working in a very small team and starting from the beginning, finding the location, the offices, building a bit of the culture, servicing the clients. But I love that because I was going back into it. Right, you've got to earn your work. You've got to prove yourself. You've got to build the culture within the team. And I really just enjoyed that smaller work environment, smaller and dynamic.
And the bad bits about it, what's?
Well, yeah, I know you guys are going to try and dig something out. It was hard, but again, I've just reckoned their learnings. We were the satellite office to Sydney. And so, it was great. So this isn't bad. I had to fly to Sydney pretty much every week. There were parties every week in Sydney. Okay, that wasn't bad. But then when you're in Melbourne, you can be isolated from the HQ, like the bigger office where everything's happening. So I do reflect on that even now. We were talking about remote working. Just reckon we've got interstate employees, full-time employees. And when we're getting together as a HQ team, knowing that actually if a particular person's over in Tasmania on their own or New South Wales, it's harder when you're just not part of that. So just trying to recognise, okay, well, when we do a huddle, everyone's on Zoom.
Particularly pre-COVID, where people weren't as used to it as when, now it's just part of life. But, I guess we're going to get to where you are now with the national business, but that's, being on the side where you are in the smaller area.
Yeah.
And don't think we will try and get something out of you. But the one thing we want to make sure that these podcasts are about is that just being the natural side. I'll take a step back. When you go to the States, if you haven't fucked up and had some pretty severe failures, they don't consider you trying, and they wear it like a badge of honour. In Australia, it's taboo, effectively. They see you as a failure, and that's one thing that we're really important trying to do is to make sure that people are really comfortable to discuss their failures. Because I've got a shitload of them, that's for sure. But because that's where we went through as I said, the Michelle's journey was 7 or 8, 9 years or whatever it was, and that was a great story. But I started another one, which was a party business, and that went for 2 years, and I lost like 1.4 million or something. I learnt more out of those 2 years than I did out of the whole 7, and that's my MBA as far as I'm concerned, and that's what we're trying to get out to a lot of people, that it's like you will stuff up. Don't worry about it. It's just part of it. If you're frozen, you don't make decisions. That's stuffing up.
Absolutely. And
I've just wanted to say that to you. That's not trying to catch you out.
But looking at my my first role, I always go back to sort of influential people. I just had a really, the whole management team were just amazing. Again, when you've got good cultures, good people, so you not just could be honest, it was promote. You've just got to be honest that if you do make a mistake, it's not about hiding, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. Bring it up to the open, work through it, move on. Honesty, integrity. So again, it probably sounds boring, but
it's not. It's so critical.
So I think, in terms of learning every day, it's learning. If someone comes to me in the team, and I know they feel like this, I'm not a scary person, but they're very, not say happy, but there's no mistake to cover up. It's okay. Well, here's the learning. Let's move on. Like that's all you can do. Learn from that. And as we know in the last couple of years, even if you've got the most perfect 3-year plan, it won't go to plan. Something's going to happen anyway. So don't try and have this perfect plan. Be able to have discussions, work with what you've got,
adapt.
move on.
Exactly.
So now you've been in the corporate role, been in advertising, brand accounts, going to lots of parties, travelling around, sounds great, and then you decided to get into the franchising sector.
Yep.
So initially in marketing at Curves. So how did that come about? So that role?
Threw in a couple of kids then.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
while I was at Iris, I was there for about 4.5 years. I had 2 children at
Yep.
that time, or at the end.
So the party stopped anyway.
They did. They stopped. I thought, well, time to move.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. So, but when I had my daughter, I took about 6 months off, went back part time, then went back full time. But I always knew, like the plan was to have, ideally, it would be lovely to have 2 children. So in my mind, I was just in a slightly different phase, thinking, okay, I was okay to take my foot off a little bit. I've got to be careful. I'd always work hard, but not doing 5 days. Happy to be part-time before I couldn't even think about that. But after I had my son, it's amazing how it just clicked together. I was like, right, ready. Like I knew that I'd achieved sort of what I wanted in that sense. That it was about finding...
Stage 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I was just lucky in terms of a job. It just happened to come up. There was a marketing role in the fitness industry.
Which you loved, yeah.
Yep. And I wasn't particularly thinking, I must get into franchising, although I do recognise since I've been in Australia, there've always been franchising-related companies. So it was more that the primary drive was in the fitness industry, like, wow, okay, this is what I love doing. Although I'd never worked in corporate for a gym. I have worked for gyms in my sort of growing up, but not in a corporate role. So that was the first time I'd then taken a corporate job there. But to me, yes, the idea of a marketing role, fitness, it was a global role, lots of things that I could apply to that. That was a chance to move and go into a full-time role again.
So how big were they in Australia then?
They're about, when I started, probably about 200
Okay.
studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, a decent
Wow.
size. I find it, people always hear me saying this. It really is. It's a great product. At some point, it needs to come back. It's fantastic. But there's definitely lots of learnings to go, how does a big brand then not survive? Or not to say not survive, it's really gone down. I think it's about 67 studios now.
Okay.
The service, the actual product and service, there's a great opportunity in the market. But again, I was thinking about, okay, where are we now with KX? And that was what really appealed to me. Suddenly it was going from, well, we're new, we're growing, we've got all this future ahead of us. How do we build a business that future just keeps going this way rather than...
So you went from marketing to GM
Yep.
in that role. So, and at the time, where did it? So had it started to decline, or was it already still going up while you were there?
Yeah, we weren't growing.
Yeah.
We were just sort of managing. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was some of the, could you, now in hindsight, at the time, it would have been, okay, what are we doing to try and grow?
Yeah.
But now looking back sort of 5 years later, can you see what the decisions were being made that were impacting on the growth?
Well, yeah. I just think that there wasn't the investment, even from a company level, of this is, Australia is a market that we need to be honest, it needs to just be relaunched. There needs to be, as if you were going into market, what would you do? You're creating awareness, you're putting money behind marketing, you're increasing, in a way, the teams to be able to support and grow and support the franchise network. None of that was happening. It was more sort of reducing that, managing bottom lines. Again, I think being owned by PE and in a different world, they had different objectives and priorities.
Squeeze the dollar.
And again, look, I get it. When you work in the other side of the world, if you work in England or America, and you've literally got hundreds of studios, and the budgets are so much bigger, Australia can almost look a bit like just a bit of a line, which possibly is a bit of a deep priority at that time, because
So they were massive elsewhere, were they? They had how big internationally?
At one point, Curves was 10,000. It was in the record
really?
breakers. Not when I was there, but it was the fastest growing. It was the biggest. It was a really, really successful brand. Yeah.
It's the ownership. It's a really interesting point. We've talked a bit about that with a couple of people that have been involved in businesses where there's private equity or listed. In franchising is such a relationship business, and the relationship between the founders and the franchisees is critical to the business. And in the US, I've just spent a bit of time in the US and went to IFA, and private equity is all over at franchising, and it's successful.
Yeah.
Here it has had its challenges here, because things like that, they obviously haven't invested to the same degree and haven't been as flexible. And this is times, the brands doesn't have the relevance in Australia. So the decision making it doesn't sound like it was really supporting the relationship side of the business.
Yeah.
Did you, having, now you're in a private business, we'll talk more about that,
Yeah.
but being in a private equity business, do you think that's the case and they could have done things differently?
Yeah. Oh, but again, like when you're at the other end, you don't know what their ultimate objectives are. Well, I mean, you do roughly know, there's going to be a sale date. They've got different priorities. It isn't, okay, let's build. We want the reputation to be, if I think about KX and Aaron and Andy and all of us who represent the brand, like we want longevity, we want legacy. There's different priorities. So I don't want to, you can't sort of make comments, I feel like this in any business. It's easy to make a comment when you don't know the full picture. But there's just lots of learnings, and you work out what kind of role you want to play in franchising, the kind of brand that you want to run. And again, I know that for us and Aaron and Andy and KX, we're not looking to just grow quickly and sell. It's actually building a really solid, reputable, sustainable, and we love the brand. We want people who work with us, so our franchise partners, to love the brand too. Like that's our goal.
But as GM, were you involved in setting strategic goals for the business, or was it really pushed down to you?
Yeah, yes, from an Oceania, yes, it was Australia and New Zealand, but limited within the funds that we had.
Yeah.
So there was no, if you've got a strategic direction, it might include, well, we need to invest to get some money to do this new project, which is going to ultimately support the business. There was none of the extra. It was just, working within our means, which is limiting.
Was it a master out here in Australia?
No. Well, no. Sorry. Yes, it was a master. America, though, had the master rights.
Right.
So the company's all sort of very, not say confusing, but because of the Curves and Jenny Craig ownership, it was that particular owner who also owned Curves and Jenny over in America then had the master here. So there were different masters around the world.
Jenny Craig was a big business, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that still going?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Might give him a call.
And your first taste of franchising, as you say, so what were your sort of initial thoughts of how the franchise model worked and in terms of supporting franchisees? And
I think initially I thought, you don't get much money to spend in marketing. Just the reality of coming from a BMW or a Shell or an Adidas, and then you go into a fitness franchise marketing fund. Right, okay, there is limited, and that's again that reality of so if you're that sort of turning point of you need more dollars, well, you need to get more dollars. The company have to recognise that there's more than the marketing fund can necessarily deliver. So that was interesting, and then sort of knowing that marketing fund as well is fluid. It's not a budget. You don't have $1 million to spend. You may have $1 million, you may have 500, you may have 1.5. It depends on performance. Like that. Yeah. That was really interesting to see. So you've got to be dynamic. You've got to be, in any job, you've got to constantly look at results. But that marketing fund is not a set amount, and I think that's always really important that people know. And but yeah, franchise, as you said, with regards to franchising. But I love this. Just the power of those relationships. And I've actually still got some relationships with Curves owners from now. I mean, it's 5 years ago since I've left. The power of those relationships is so important. Being able to work with these people who are ultimately they've invested in the brand. They are the brand just as much as we're the brand, really. That was just so critical. You can't just go and say, this is what we're going to do. You've got to have the buy-in and work with owners on the ground to be able to deliver a good campaign or a successful role.
So do you think the decline in the number of outlets, if more money had been spent on marketing and to grow, because it's the ultimate customers they need, the members in the gyms, they're not getting the members in the gyms.
Oh, look, I'd like to say, I'm sure there's a role for that brand. I mean, then again, there'll be others out there. So you've got to be relevant in the market at the right time, right place, have the right people on board. But yeah, I don't think the decline has just been because there's not good operators. There's fantastic operators there, but it's in franchising. It's a whole collective effort. You've really got to have. Yeah, you've got to treat it like a corporate business and find the money and have the plan. You've got to have your the owners on board. You've got to be able to deliver it in studios, maintain brand. It's just a whole collective effort.
It's a very busy space as well.
Yeah.
Very busy.
So what was the best bit about that role? What are you proudest of?
Great question. I mean, to be honest though, as an example, I met Aaron probably about 3 years before I started. And I was, again, just I really loved my role. It was exciting. I enjoyed working across Australia and New Zealand. We had, I mean, at that time, there's a lot more studios than what I have currently at KX. So it was great, sort of getting to know different regions, different owners. It was a rewarding environment to work in. The people make it. So it was really, it was challenging but interesting. And I loved being in the fitness industry. So again, and I think this all the time. I love being in an industry that inspires me. The fact
Wearing
that we
active
are.
wear.
Well, actually, I've got some jeans on. But it's amazing what's very inspiring. Things like when we did Curvette of the Year. But it was actually, finding those curves. I've got to be careful. This is meant to be a KX interview, but but clients who really have transformed their lives because of the workout or the community, and like you really just see these inspirational stories. It is so rewarding to be in that industry.
So it's just last question on Curve. So
No, I've got one more too.
So who were the franchisees? What were they investors that had it under management, or were they?
They were owner operators.
Right.
So typically owner operators who were coaches themselves. It's funny in America they go the mum and pop operator, but they really were. They were just people of the community who were then running fitness professionals, but then running the studios.
Were they big setup costs?
No, I can't really remember. It was very similar to KX. You've got your studio because it's all boutique fitness, so they're not big studio spaces. You've got your 13 pieces of equipment. It's actually quite simple. Not like if you're going to a retail with all the machines and everything else. So
Okay. Cool.
And so you've gone from marketing role to the general manager role. So, your previous roles, you're not necessarily the boss. You're running a budget pot for your marketing spend or something like that. So that transition, I'm sure that's exciting. But like you're obviously driven. Yeah. How did you go, and what did you learn, and what did you weren't good at on that transition?
It's probably when you look back and think, oh, that was interesting why I did it that way.
Yeah,
but I did it. And I do remember that time. It was the private equity firm were over from America. We were just sort of presenting. And I do remember that time where I was just presenting more than marketing. I can't help myself, just the way I'm thinking isn't just siloed. It was very much around the business and what the impact of, a certain spend would do in terms of the business. It was just relating back. And I remember then the the CEO then of that brand just saying, okay, that that was good, but he could see that I was thinking more than just the marketing role. And that's why when they were making some sort of redundancies in the team, it suddenly went from being the marketing person to taking on the big role at Curves. But I was very conscious that I hadn't come from the studios. I didn't know how to run the studios inside out. The operations team were actually quite, to say, the brand was, gosh, I can't even remember, it'd probably been in Australia for about 15 years before me. And some of those team members had been with Curves for that long. I was very conscious just coming in and assuming I knew more than them because I absolutely knew I didn't. And their level of understanding and relationships was so big. So I really just consciously tried to understand where they've come from and take on board those learnings rather than come in and go, right, we're going to do it a completely different way. So again, I was very conscious of learning from the experts on the ground. But then
managing those relationships with people that are probably older than you, more senior.
Definitely. But then just bring it together and trying to also connect that relationship then with, for them, they'd gone through so Curves used to be privately owned and then were sold to PE. So they've gone through this big transition. So almost trying to be the new person coming in to then connect that new journey.
Do you think you're a pretty self-aware person?
I think so. Probably to my detriment at times, because then you can be like, oh gosh, you really think, oh, what's John thinking about me right now? Or like I can really sort of be conscious of how I come across. But I think I've always been, and probably even more, I'm very self-aware of how I come across to people, and also how I might make people feel. I'm never trying to just come across like I'm the best person, and it's very much reading the room, and I'd like to think I'm quite self-aware.
Did you do any, because you've coming from a marketing background, but in a GM role you've got HR, technology, finance, all these things that report into you that you don't necessarily have the skill sets that you develop. So did you go and do any external development, or private equity guys, they weren't spending a lot of money on training and development, so did you have to go and find places to learn about those areas, or just all on the job?
definitely all on the job, but I probably have done a lot of on the job training. If I go back to my first role, I remember doing a marketing course while I was in my, just in that first business, but then taking everything that I was learning and presenting it at the lunchtimes. And I was at that point maybe 21, 22, just presenting it on to the team. And I think I've always taken that kind of like, what can I be giving back? And if you're in small environments, you are learning. You can choose to be aware and learn from HR, learn from operations, and sort of really learn the business. I'm sure there's people who can just do your job, but I think that's thing. There's always been on the job training, and then at Curves, and because it was Curves, Jenny Craig, there were really great teams. So I mean, I'm never going to suddenly become a HR specialist, but there are HR specialists there. So then it's having the right conversations, questions, again, bringing the team together and letting them do their job. I wasn't there to be the HR specialist.
And so we'll move away now to your current role.
KX, right.
No, so you've gone from obviously large businesses, private equity-owned businesses, to a fast-growing, emerging franchisor with a couple as the founders, which to take over as the CEO. How did that process come about, and then what were the early signs of that that you found the right role?
Yeah.
What stage was this? How many studios there?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in my first year, we were celebrating the 50th studio within a couple of months, so 50 studios. As I said, I mean, Aaron and I met at a franchising event and sort of connected around the brands. We would just give each other, we were just talking, like just general sort of advice and going through the same thing at the same time. And there were a couple of things happened, like a couple of roles at KX at the time, including a marketing role, but I was really happy with what I was doing and where we were at. So there was no sort of intention of moving. But anyway, three years on, different factors happened. My mum decided to move to Australia, which was a big one for me, just knowing there'd be extra support. And again, that sort of shift in thinking I could probably step up a gear and do more. I was starting to cruise, just knew the job versus...
So kids are 4 or 5
at that point,
age?
Yeah. Yep. And again, there was going to be another change with PE selling to like the actual IP of Curves was sold to Japan, and then there was just a lot of movement. So again, it was going to be a bit of a shift. And then from an Aaron and Andy side, a role came up. They're actually looking for a COO at the time. I think Aaron was still thinking I'd stay in as the CEO, or he would stay in. So all those things sort of combined. I was like, you know what? And I was really inspired though with the idea of working for privately owned, small company. It ticked all the boxes. Small fitness industry, dynamic. I had met Aaron obviously then over the last 3 years, so had got to know him. Andy, his wife, I actually knew from BMW. It was just a pure coincidence. But as the conversation started, like, this is weird. She organised my hen party. Like we really knew each other. I mean, obviously still do. But that was, again, this amazing feeling to go, I know these people.
Right.
Like
Very familiar. Yeah.
And we had a couple of meetings. It definitely did not happen overnight. But then I still remember sort of meeting them and thinking, okay, this is cool. There's some things in the pipeline that sounds exciting. I can really get stuck into this. And then that's when Aaron also said, oh, do you know what? Thinking maybe not the COO, just straight into the CEO. So I think he was also at the point of his transition. Yeah, so he was ready. So it was actually really good that it took that time. So yeah.
And what was the plan at that point? Was there, without giving away any house secrets or anything, was it global domination?
No, it wasn't. It's funny. I mean, this is what I love about Aaron. When he first started KX, we sort of giggle, and he opened up Malvern, which is the first studio, 13 years ago. And he opened it up thinking, it's going to be brilliant, and no one walked through the door. So at that time, he didn't realise you have to do marketing and do other stuff to bring people in. So that was his first learning. Then he realised people like the workout. I went, okay, we can maybe open a couple more. So the goal was, okay, open a couple more. And then people started to want to franchise. So it was like, okay, let's do 5. Then that goal went massive BHAG goal, 50. We're going to get there. So those, in terms of goals and expectations, it is interesting sort of looking back at the beginning when I started. It was just like, well, let's try and get to 100 studios. Let's have 5 company-owned studios. Let's just make sure we've got a new system in place, an apparel range. It was just very, nice ideas. And then you just quickly keep smashing them. So like reset, like what are our goals? We're sort of growing the goals as we go.
And that transition for Aaron's obviously had to deal with it, because we work with lots of founders, and they're involved in every aspect of the business. Because at the start, because Andy was teaching, wasn't she, as well?
Andy's never taught. She's done every role in KX apart from being a trainer. But yeah.
But they're all active, but they're as a couple actively involved in every aspect of the business.
Very.
And so that letting go, letting you make decisions, also you finding your feet, because what decisions can you make before you ask the shareholders?
Yeah.
How did that go in the early days?
Well, I remember at the beginning, I think Aaron, in his mind, thought, right, there's 6 months to really just hand things over. I remember, but he's so easygoing, and there'll be a conversation of, I think you got this. So, we were just consciously trying to sort of shuffle. It's more around the expectations of owners as well. Come to me and not Aaron, like building that kind of trust. And then, I mean, for me, I guess the business has changed a lot over the years and would have just been progressively. For example, different, whether it's different suppliers, different partners, different teams. So, of course, at the beginning, I'm managing his team, him and Andy's team. Whereas as you start to build your own team, that also creates that kind of differentiation and transition. Aaron would probably find it weird to come in and run a leadership meeting with no one that he's actually employed, because we have our way of working and setting up. So I think, yes, it naturally happens. I think for Aaron and Andy, they've been very, obviously trusting, and maybe that the relationship comes back to that as well. We share the same values, particularly Aaron and I. I think we've got a lot of similarities. Like when you look at the brand values at KX, like they're Aaron, but they're me as well. So I think that's a nice transition. So yeah, I think it's trusting. Obviously, again, I've always worked hard. I've always put everything in. That they know that I'll always do anything for the business. But, that's probably the other conversation to have with him, to say, well, how did you find it on the other side?
I think we will get Aaron on, but just like were there times that, I know, having had roles where you've got reporting to people that have actively been involved in the business, whether it that you've made decisions that he's come back and said, I wouldn't have done it like that, or, or you've made a decision that hasn't worked. You brought on a franchisee or franchise partner that hasn't worked, or things like that. Yeah. Have you had those sort of harder conversations with Aaron?
Yeah. I mean, franchisees, he's good in the sense of, like, he'll never criticise. Generally, we've made some good decisions, I'd like to think. I mean, of course, there might be some, but he's done it too. You might have someone in who you think is going to be incredible, but actually it changes. Well, we know this. In franchising, it's a journey and things change. So at least he's had that experience. I think I've definitely got a different approach, and I guess time will tell whether it's right or not, just in terms of I'm very much partnership driven. And I just know that if our franchise partners aren't happy, if they're not making money, if we're seeing them going backwards, there is no future. And I've seen that. I know that's what will happen. So I've always, whenever there's decisions to be made, I'm always going to, well, what's in it for them? And I know that there's definitely been conversations or times I was like, oh, you're being too soft. Or, for him, he'll be thinking, well, what's the opportunity for the business? Versus I'm looking at the long opportunity of how do we keep this group engaged? How do we make our model attractive? Even if it means there are compromises and it is all a compromise. So I think he's probably, and we'll say he and Andy have probably had to shift their thinking a little bit. I reckon that would be a bit of that shift of, at the beginning I might be challenged, well, why are you doing that? Why are you agreeing to compromising this rebate? Or why are you, giving this person an incentive, or, reducing their fee because they've been around for X amount of years? Whereas for me, it's like, no, it's a small difference that I think will make a big difference in the long run. So that during COVID, there's probably a couple. I think that was the time where decisions are being more scrutinised, which I 100% get.
So COVID, running any business during COVID was a challenge, but running a fitness business during COVID, it seemed like fitness was the first one to get shut down, the last one to open up again, all the way through it. Yeah. You're running it remotely. I think Aaron had left to go to move, and Andy had moved to Queensland.
They did in the second year of it,
Yeah, so you're down here in Victoria, which we had most lockdowns in the world. Yeah. How did that, you've got no money because the clubs are all closed.
Yes, yeah.
How did that go for you?
Wow. I mean, we got through it.
Yeah.
It was, again, definitely a journey. As I said, I do remember there were times there was, and I won't go into it, but there was a personal conversation. I remember Aaron sort of saying, because it was just the reality of how it will affect.
How are we going to afford your salary?
Well, not that, because we weren't paying people.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
were all stood down pretty much and
Yeah.
getting paid a couple of days,
Yeah.
working full time. Don't tell HR.
Yeah.
But, no, and again, the drive was we're going to do everything possible to service
Yeah.
the network. Our challenge was majority of, half our studios are Victoria, but then the others are scattered
Open.
around, and they're not. Yeah, they might be open as well. So we had to keep servicing. Yet we're not making the same kind of money. So that was the challenge, the balance. But I think it was the reality of suddenly I could see a little bit of that obvious fear of, if this all stops, like, this is our life, this is my children's, this is everything is in this business. And that's different when you're then a founder and owner of the business versus being an employee and thinking, okay, well, if it finishes, what happens? Like I just wanted to do everything to make sure the business would get through. And we've got an amazing team. The team are all, they share those values. We're all going, how do we work together? Whether it's extra hours, different ideas and innovation. It was scary but an exciting time.
Did you lose any?
We didn't lose
During that
any
time?
studios, no.
That's
Look,
good.
we had, for example, a studio Red Hill in the first year of COVID. Our lease came to the end. We're like, right, let's just close that. It just does not make sense. So company owned. There were a couple. There was another one, the Dockland studio here. The owner did the same after 5 years. Went, well, we're going to close that now, which was a great decision because obviously Dockland took that much longer to come back. So no, look, we are, to say we're lucky. The owners, in fact, I feel like the owners were even more fired up than ever. It was just a different dynamic. We did do things like online. We didn't do it to make loads of money. We did not make loads of money, but we did it for engagement. It gave trainers purpose. A fond memory was actually, I think it was International Pilates Day, probably 3 years ago now, when we just ran online Zooms for maybe 4 hours. There was different sessions happening. We were getting nearly 1,000 people on a Zoom at home. I mean, it's not our core business, but it was just so incredible to see people, and actually all over the world. We would have people joining from America and Europe, just coming in to come together and do a workout like that. That was a highlight.
Cool.
Making no money, but engaging people and sharing that KX experience.
Did anything change as a result of COVID? Like, that sort of stuff? Are you still doing any of that?
Not at the moment.
Right.
And it's really interesting. The fitness industry really has bounced back. And I think, for us being social creatures, that desire to be in a studio with other people, having the accountability of a trainer or a coach there, and getting out of your house. I mean, I'm someone, there's all sorts of people. I still work out at home, but I go to a studio as well. Other people just can't, including Andy, as an example, Aaron's wife, said, I cannot be at home any longer. Just get me into studios. There are people who just need to be in. But some of the technology and the innovation that happened is there in the back pocket. Not to say for if we need it. I think, again, there's been so many learnings and has shifted the business to a point that we can. Do you remember we haven't said the word pivot for a long time, so I might as well say it. You can pivot it to another angle. But it's there. It hasn't been lost, but it's just not the priority right now. Like, we're in a position that we can continue to look at how do we drive people into the studios? How do we give them that really, unique, amazing experience? But I do keep saying to the team, we've just got to remember those days of being shut down. And so almost that thinking of our business does rely on this studio experience. If that happens again and we don't have the support of the government and everything else, that is a fragile, vulnerable position to be in. So it hasn't been completely disregarded. We are working on a couple of other things to go, right, what else do we do to make sure that we're hedging our bets and we're not just relying on that one source.
So you do shirts and hats and all that sort of stuff. Did you start pushing that more online during that period? Is that like a sizable element, or is it just a couple
tiny.
of token?
Yeah,
okay.
but I mean, to be honest, so apparel is a bit of an Aaron passion. He would love to have this amazing apparel business, which I think it all sounds fun, but we all know the reality is to create an amazing business. Again, you need a team, you need resources, money. So we've actually launched a very small. This is the uniform, but there's a sort of bit more client-led apparel range. We've launched that, but it is small. It's a very small portion of the overall business. And again, at this point in time, and it will always be, our expertise is delivering the KX workout, the reformer workout in studio. Apparel is a complementary value add.
Yeah.
There are amazing apparel businesses out there that we're not suddenly thinking, oh, let's ignore the workout, let's go and become an apparel business. But, again, there's something on the side happening, especially as we grow globally. There's value
the global
for it.
side. The global expansion is obviously something that Aaron's been sort of involved in heavily. That seems to be part of the business that he's focusing on. 5 countries now?
We're 6.
6
including Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So 5
additionals.
new markets.
Yeah.
So where are you?
So Australia, New Zealand, China, Taiwan, Jakarta, so Indonesia and Singapore. So Singapore opened just last month.
And trading well?
Well, we are so far, touch wood, but just that it's emerging. So, for example, there's one studio in New Zealand. Singapore opened 2 weeks ago. An incredible opening. So that was just so rewarding to see. But I think it's just really rewarding. It's a master relationship. We just so confident in those masters. Likewise, New Zealand, Cara used to be a company studio trainer, has, not say grown up with KX, but really knows the brand and will take that. That's our goal, like taking the brand into another country, not just selling the rights and seeing what happens. China actually typically, grew quite quickly, but then I remember we signed the JV in 2019 in August. By December, like, this is funny. Why are their visas being rejected? They can't come over, and then it all. So they've had they're going to be starting again this year. There's one studio now in China. They got up and then they went back down, but that's fine. They've actually had a lot of learnings, and we had a conversation the other day. They're just trying to work out where the KX brand really is positioned in the market, because for us, KX is premium, but it's not, completely out there. It's affordable. It's value. In China, it is sort of pushing the higher ends of a premium. So it's to be able to say justify the model. We have a KX form of bed. Everything we do is designed for KX, which makes it a more expensive than just get a cheap bed and do some workouts. It's very much we need the trainer who's an expert trainer. We need the bed, and it's specifically designed for KX. And now they're realizing they've had time to really get to know the brand and go, how do we relaunch this within China? But maybe accept it's not going to be 2,000 studios. Are we okay with 200? But they're higher end for us. Yes, we'd rather a great quality than the numbers.
And do you foresee your role is day-to-day interaction with the masters or the JV partners in those countries? So they report into you, you're essentially or partner with you, so you're helping with the training and the development, helping with the franchisee recruitment and all those things, or you're letting them sort of go to do their own thing a little bit more?
No, definitely. I mean, it's not me. Again, this is where I've got a good team. It's not Aaron. It's almost not me. I'll be involved in. I've got direct relationships with all of them. But then I'll say it. If they need to have specific training on the system, or in operations or marketing, they've got to go. That's the team. We've got experts. So my leadership team are the the day-to-day contact then with the masters.
But it is so refreshing to talk to someone that has a genuine franchisor attitude where you have to get them making money. Mm-hmm. If they're making money, that's all you've got to do.
Yeah.
And so many people, not so many, but you meet a lot of people that you can tell you're just not going to be a franchisor. You'll get to a point where you're just fleecing the shit out of it and them. And it'll never grow. It sounds like Aaron. I asked you before about are you self-aware, because there are a lot of founders and franchisors that are just not. And Bruce touched on it before, that when you get into that 2025 mark and you've got to start getting teams in, people can't let go and all that sort of stuff. Sounds like Aaron has done a fantastic job at that, because he's obviously got a huge amount of faith in you, but must be fairly self-aware himself to allow people to do what they're supposed to do, what they're employed to do, which is fantastic. You'd be amazed how many people, and you've been in the industry for a while, how you meet them and you just know they're not going to be a great franchisor. So that's fantastic. And I'll bring that up just to, how do you make sure that your masters are going to have that same approach in, particularly markets like China, Singapore, Malaysia, whatever, where there's potential massive growth?
Great question. And I think in reality, we also have to respect they are different markets. Yeah. So that's the other learning.
Are they big markets? Is there a lot of Pilates there anyhow?
No, not to the level of to say KX. So KX is a dynamic reformer. There are, for example, in China and Singapore, there's Pilates and people still bunch it, Pilates and yoga, which is our workout couldn't be more different. So the markets are growing. It's almost where KX was 5 to 10 years ago. Okay. So they'll change quite quickly. Everything's huge opportunity. But look, we say that, and we also recognise that is a massive challenge. Probably China is the one which is going to be the hardest because it's cultural differences. They're going to have speed to market approaches. Our systems don't work the same way that they do here. But, there's also a level of going, but at the same time, if we try and really control everything and have it all what we do here, that probably won't work either, because just because it works in Australia does not mean it's going to work in Australia, America. Probably, New Zealand and Australia are the most aligned markets. But, to say the recruitment phase, that's probably the key phase. We don't just sell to anyone. In fact, we've never advertised internationally. These people have come to us through connections. They've either been a client or they know the brand, they've heard of it, they've then worked really hard to prove why they're the right people for KX. So we're not just advertising saying, great, John, you can have that one, we're going to sell it to you. Yeah. So whether it's Australian franchise partners or obviously a master franchise relationship is even more, you're sort of giving more responsibility and accountability, but we take the recruitment phase.
I assume you have a national marketing manager at KX, do you?
We do for Australia, yeah.
And are you in their office all the time going, that's not right?
No, not at all. They're the ones always pulling up. So we're all in the same office, all open plan. Our marketing team they're fantastic. So really data-driven, innovative, pretty young, which is good. Just fingers on the pulse with communications. But when Andy used to run the marketing team back in the day, it's funny because it's not her background. She's more of a tech sort of IT systems person, but really ran it with, I guess, a good hold over what the brand needs to be. And the brand is very strong, and that has continued.
So before we get to tips, because we've been, but we are going to ask one more case. You must have got something wrong at KX. So what's it? So there's got
ask Aaron.
No.
Get him on the phone.
No, come on. We're not going to call him today. But what's something that didn't go well because you have stuffed up at KX or as a business, not necessarily you personally, but as a business, we got this wrong and we've moved on.
Oh gosh, we're always learning, we're always moving on. But I would just say probably the low light for me, which then you go, what did I get wrong? It was after that first year of COVID, and just the team dynamic was not right. So it comes back to, again, being people related. And there were people that shouldn't have been part of that team.
In HQ?
Yeah, within HQ. Not so much franchise partners. They're pretty solid. But that to me was the hardest, when realising actually this team we're not going forward. And of course I'm a big part of that because I've either recruited wrong or I'm leading them wrong, very conscious, you get different personalities, and perhaps it was just the brilliant people, experts, but the wrong group.
Together.
And that it in the end it worked out. People moved on and there's a bit of a change. So actually it was Christmas Day, Boxing Day, going, right, I've got to recruit a whole new pretty much leadership team for 2021, I can't remember the dates now, but that was a really challenging moment. But actually, it's then resulted in, for the last 2 years, have had a really strong team. So, but that was hard. So again, I would take accountability. It's my team. It's whatever I was doing and navigating at that time. It just was not working at that point.
And you're on the board of the FCA now, so outside of KX, so you're getting to interact with other great franchisors regularly. How's that going for you, and why did you do that?
I really respect the FCA and again the franchise industry. I sort of feel just aligned to the franchise industry just as much as fitness. I feel like there is such an opportunity for franchising in Australia, but also to really improve and enhance what franchising's all about. And I really hate the word franchise. Like, it shouldn't be a negative. It should be people think, oh, brilliant, what an opportunity. Not, people get it wrong, or they're not trained, or like they're here to just make a quick buck off other people. Just want to be able to help drive a positive, recognised position for franchising in the industry. And then you just realise how massive it is in Australia. Just pretty much every industry's got franchising within it. So it's such a big opportunity for Australia. I guess I've probably been on that for over a year, maybe 18 months. Time's going very quick. You put in those COVID couple of years. But yeah, really, really interesting just to then have a chance to work with different people. We're resetting the strategy a little bit. New CEO.
Surely the charter and FCA must be no English people allowed.
Yeah,
I mean, if they're not.
There's not franchising in England.
So, is there?
Well, not to. Sorry, there's not a franchising code. There is, but not to the extent. It's a bit like in America. America and Australia have got very, very, not say complicated, but just there's a lot of detail and thought that goes into franchising. So it's different in England.
So you just have permanent residency. So you will always be English. They're like the Ashes. Who do you go for?
Oh, yeah, great. See, I am actually a citizen here, and I do have two Aussie children.
Well, it didn't fucking sound like it before.
Oh, it's a toughie. I just don't watch it anymore.
And what about tips for franchisors? So there's you're part of an amazing brand that's grown really quickly. There's lots of we now know there's 1,000 franchisors in Australia that are on the register.
Yeah.
A lot of them struggle to get past 20, 30, even 5 sites.
Yeah.
What sort of tips have you got for franchisors, and particularly the smaller ones and the emerging ones?
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, though, you've got to just be going to your values and knowing who you are, and then knowing what that opportunity is. So for example, yes, we're growing, and we are growing quite quickly. The exponential growth has happened, but we also haven't said we have to be at this number by this time. And that's probably a little bit of me saying that to Aaron, because if we're so numbers driven and so like, oh, this is what we have to do, but without building the foundations to actually get there, that's where you're going to fail. So we've grown as a result of being really focused on values, good people, training, education, support, and then it's not really a surprise that we're growing and we're keeping good people as a result, both within HQ and then our franchise partners as well. So I think sort of knowing who you are. I mean, other people would not want to lead like me and go, no, we're doing numbers, that's what we're doing, and their approach would be very different. And they would probably struggle to work with me or within our world. So it's not saying that I'm right. If you're leading a franchise brand, you've just got to know who you are, not compare to others, just be very clear on what your path is, and making sure you've obviously got those short-term steps in place as well.
You are super impressive.
Oh,
Congratulations on your journey. I hate that fucking term. No, it's really cool. It's a good story. Good effing story.
Yeah. Thanks for telling us your effing story.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Okay.
Good on you.